the power belief is one of the most like powerful forces. That if you want to be the best at something, the worst thing that you can have is balance.
You are obviously a previous guest on the podcast. So episode 17, we kind of run through Connor's whole life story and up to the point of his powerlifting career. And now we'll dive into some more topics on this one, along with his competitions this past year, like 2022 Nationals and the 2022 Virginia Pro, and what's in store for the future. So I guess with that, unless you want to talk about some other things before we get into the 2022 Nationals, but I kind of want to hear about that because you said you had a poor performance. I'm sure it wasn't a poor performance for the average human standards, but for yourself, obviously, I'm sure it wasn't on par with what you were expecting.
We had a bunch of bodybuilders on the podcast just recently, and we dive into the prep side of things and the recovery aspect of training and how crucial that is to your performance when it comes competition day, whether that's in bodybuilding on stage or powerlifting. So I guess let's dive into your prep and what you think you did right and what you did wrong for the 2022 Nationals.
Sure. So I guess like as a whole, the prep was a disaster. It like not even like I'm not even like gonna try to like sugarcoat it. It was just like a total disaster. So I guess the main reason why why it was a disaster is probably because I was in a caloric deficit like the entire like pretty much like the entire prep because the weight classes had changed and like I this is like it was totally on me. I just procrastinated like trying to lose the weight and get down to the new weight class. So the previous weight class was 93 kilo, which is 205, and then they changed it to 90 kilo or 198. So I was like, all right, I it's a 3 kilo difference. It's not like that substantial. It's not like substantially different, but regardless, like you still got to meet a lower weight class requirement at the end of the day. So I definitely let my body go over the course of like the holidays last year and leading into the later winter months, and yeah, blossomed up all the way to damn near about like 220 pounds, which is a little bit probably the chunkiest I've ever been in my life, which is yeah,
What's your
it
comp
was.
weight usually?
So I have to meet 198 pounds, so basically like all weigh in
198.
either
Okay.
yeah, I'll have to yeah, which so basically like there's all weigh in at like about 198 exactly. So like
Hmm.
that's like kind of what yeah,
Holy smokes.
that's my comp weight. So but like I said, normally at least like when I'm like 1 week out of the meet, I want to be at least like the heaviest that I would want to be is like 204, 204
Hmm.
ish because like then it's like a reasonable water cut down and like
Right.
food weight manipulation, all that good stuff. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so like I was like pretty procrastinated with my weight cut. Was in a caloric deficit like the entire time. The squat frequency was way too high. So like I squat 3 times a week,
Hmm.
and
Really?
all like out of those 3 times, we decided that we would give three barbell squat sessions a week. We would give that a whirl, but my body just because so I do a high bar squat, whereas the typical powerlifter they're going to do more of like a low bar style
Low.
squat.
Yeah.
But a high bar squat is inherently more fatiguing because just where the bar is placed on your back, it's just your body just cannot your legs can't really tolerate um it's just like harder to recover from compared to a low bar squat. So that like was impossible to recover from, and by the time we realized that, like it was already too late in the prep. Um, so like that was a mistake. And then I guess the only thing that kind of went well was deadlift. Deadlift went well probably just because like my leverages changed more favorably to like basically like give myself like more room to brace into the belt a little bit more.
Hmm.
But Delph went well. Uh, Hit like some nice PRs throughout the prep, and then damn near got another PR on. Damn near got a PR like on meet day. Was like 1 inch away from locking it out, but then the bar dropped out of my hand, so missed it on grip strength.
Oh,
Which so if I wake up at 3 a.m., I'm like, damn that deadlift almost got it. No, but um, No, so that was, yeah, that was. I would say overall it was just a terrible prep, and learn my lessons about just like being more proactive in the future with
Right.
regards to off season weight management, because being in a caloric deficit, as I'm sure we're all aware here, is not conducive to building strength. It's possible.
Yeah.
It's just a heck of a lot harder.
Hmm. So now you said with the squat frequency changing to 3 times a week, I assume you were doing twice a week prior to that, high bar?
So I've pretty much like, sorry, I should have like made it, I should have like clarified it a little bit more. So what I've almost always done, like when I ever since I've done competitive powerlifting, I've almost always been doing 3 times a week squat frequency, but not 3 times a week barbell squat. So
Okay.
the one accessory that my coach and we've personally found works really well for me is, are you guys familiar with the safety bar squat?
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we
So
used to.
yeah,
Love it.
yeah. So like that, like that's a lot easier for my body to handle and recover from. So like we can push a ton of volume, get a whole lot of good like high quality squat working through that, and it really helps me personally like keep a good squat pattern going. Um, that's something that we found, like where it's one day safety bar squat, and the other two are barbell squat variations.
Gotcha. All
Yep.
right. And what was your rep scheme changing from? So now you're doing the 3 barbell squats. What would your rep scheme change from session to session throughout the week?
So like usually, so the first squat day would be on Sunday. So that squat day would typically be like a more volume based day where like
Mm,
the top set is not, it's not like crazy high intensity. Um, are you guys familiar with RPE?
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like yep. So like the top set on that day would be kind of like no more than about like RP7, so it's not getting like crazy intense. And then the
Yeah.
back downs would be like somewhat manageable, so not really like exceeding like an RP of 6 for those sort of top sets. Probably looking at like sets of 5 for the most part, like 4 to 5. And then the middle squat day, barbell squat day, is like super easy, like very easy doubles that don't even really have to think about. It's just like mindless work. It's just an opportunity to practice and then keep everything a little bit fresh. And then the final squat day of the week, which happened on Thursday, is like when we're trying to work up to like a big like triple, double, single, etc. And then
Yep.
like relatively like intense backdowns.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Right. And I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the whole weight thing. Because so obviously you had a issue with the losing weight towards the end and the build up to the nationals. Now, something that Dylan and I have talked about, and Dylan kind of puts emphasis on whenever we talk about like weightlifting or anything to do with the gym, is that mass moves mass, and you kind of mentioned that as well in a way. So, what is your like in prep when you're lifting and you're preparing to get to this competition? When do you kind of switch your mindset of, okay, I'm gonna start kind of trimming the weight here to get it down to a reasonable area?
Yeah, so I would say like my mindset on this topic has taken a big shift within recent months, because the biggest thing that, and I'm sure we've all like experienced this, like when you lose weight, your leverages change pretty rapidly, and
Mm,
that
Hmm.
changes the way that you squat, bench, and deadlift, and just move in general. So, and the biggest thing that introduces is it complicates your ability to like execute consistently. So being able to get down to that weight much earlier and giving yourself the opportunity to train at that lower body weight is something that is like extremely invaluable. So this past meet, I didn't have to cut weight because it was based on it's called DOTS formula. So it's basically just like a pound for pound measure of everything, that like it basically just takes your body weight, your total, and then it outputs a score, and the goal is obviously just to get the highest stats. It was all DOTS based, so no weight classes. It was super nice.
gotcha.
Walked in, and yeah, so that was pretty fun. But like I said, it's extremely beneficial to like give yourself at least, in my opinion, like two solid months to train. Say so I compete at 90 kilos. If I'm weighing about like 90, 91, 92 kilos 2 months before the meet, that's a really solid chunk of time to train at that body weight and reacclimate. So that's yeah, really cool.
Gotcha. Yeah, and now, so from the point of now, when was nationals? The 2022 nationals?
June of this year.
June. Okay. All right. So between that time and the Virginia Pro, what was your approach in the sense of training and also like kind of where were you at mentally after the, let's start with that. Where were you at like in your mental state after the nationals and kind of like, obviously it was disappointing in the sense that you didn't, the outcome wasn't what you anticipated or wanted throughout. Obviously, you prep all that time for an event, and if you kind of fall short of what your expectations were, obviously that takes a toll mentally as well. So, like, where were you from a mental side of things?
Yeah, I was definitely like pretty bummed out from nationals because well, it was a combination of the prep didn't go well, and then the I coming into the meet, I didn't expect to win because the guy that won, he was worlds above every for like pretty much like everybody else in the field. But I was like, if things go well and I execute pretty well on that game day, then I have a pretty good shot at getting second place, which is hey, it's the best I can do. Ended up getting fifth, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like top five and what was in hindsight was the most competitive weight class at the meet is. I mean, it's still like really like something I guess like to be proud of, but for my personal
Right, of
standards, it
course.
was
Yeah,
it was a
yeah.
little bit of a it was a little bit of a bummer. Um, so what my coach and I did after the meet was we decided to all right, let's take a fresh look at let's take a fresh look at like the way that we're programming. So what we sort of realize is we basically in prior meet preps we basically tried to peak too early. So we tried to peak too early, and then we basically tried to we were hitting the heaviest lifts in training versus on the platform,
Mm,
where obviously it only
Mhm.
matters when you hit it on the
Right.
platform. So what we did was we basically just created a method which is not really I mean I'm sure like people have been doing it for a while, but we realized that like it's extremely beneficial for me where we basically just build momentum week to week to week, and then we basically sort of quote unquote then we kick it up a notch on maybe like that fourth or fifth week of like the training block. So basically you can only really peak once about every like for the average individual, like it depends on a whole bunch of factors such as like how heavy they are, it's like certain leverages, but really like you can only peak about like every like 3 to 5 weeks ish depending on the lift. So you need to like it's okay to purposefully early in the block or even early in the meet prep and in like the barter scheme of things, it's okay to like sort of undercut your abilities, like not really push the intensity pedal too hard, and then once you get to later in the block, later in the meet prep, then it's okay to sort of sort of push yourself more in like those cases. So like I'll give you like examples. So my heaviest squat in for this past prep that I hit in kilos was 302 and a half or 666 pounds. So that was my heaviest squat in prep. It was a great squat, but what I did in the meet was 10 kilos heavier.
holy.
What I did in the meet was 10 kilos
Wow.
heavier, which is something that I had never done before. I had never done before, like in the prep, because like it was always I had always hit like my heaviest squat, um, in training, and then like in on
Ah,
bench
that's
press,
interesting.
my what was it? The heaviest one that I did in training was I think it was 210 kilo or 463, and then in the meet I did 5 kilos heavier, which is awesome. In training on deadlift, I did 317 and a half kilo, which is pretty much exactly 700 pounds. And then in the meet, I did 15 kilos heavier than that, which is which is something I've never done before. Yeah. So
And you were
basically,
saying you're saying before in your training you were seeing your heavier lifts.
yeah, exactly. Which is
Interesting.
so basically like not like purposefully kind of just pulling it back a little bit and allowing myself to be my best version on the meet
On the platform. Yeah.
because it's like so say like you ramp up like a lot of people like a traditional powerlifting peaking block might be when you say you're like I don't know 12 to 15 days out, then you'll like you'll hit like your heaviest deadlift. And then for squat, maybe you'll hit your heaviest squat when you're about a week out, when you're about like 7 days out. And then for bench, it might be about the same. But like
Mhm.
I was following, like we were following those standard guidelines that I just listed. But it's like cool, you've hit this big number, but then all right, now you got to basically recover. You got to recover from that because it's inherently taxing, and then you got to re-ramp up to it, and it's impossible to do like in that short of time frame, especially like when you're dealing with like the weights that like not trying to brag, but like the weights that I'm lifting. It's like
Mhm.
it's hard. Yeah.
100%. And that's funny you say that too, because one thing, Joey and I were talking about too. I'm sure you've heard of Lane Norton.
Yeah.
And I forget, it was a clip a while ago that I was listening to. That he was saying that he'll see a 10 to 15% increase in his lifts on lift day. Like on comp day, all his lifts will be up 10 to 15% prior to anything that he's hit in training. And he's like, that's just, obviously individual based. It's going to be different person to person, but based on, when he gets in the mindset, it's comp day, adrenaline kicks in, he's always going to lift heavier. And I was like, wow, like, I'm thinking back to like my lifts. That's like, okay, I squat 400, squat 400, squat 400, and then all of a sudden comp day, I'm squatting 450. It's like, holy shit. Like
Yeah.
that seems like a huge jump. So I was curious, Joey and I were wondering what you'd think of that. And obviously that explains it. Like if you can time it right with your training and peak at the right time, you're going to see those increases. So how long were you giving yourself before when you were seeing your biggest lifts in training, and how did that change?
So are you asking like kind of where how did like how far out was I hitting my heaviest lifts for this past prep?
I guess both. So how far out when you were seeing your biggest lifts in training, how long before prep was that? And then how long was it how long before comp was that? And then this time, how long was the time where you were peaking on the platform like you wanted to?
Yeah, so like in prior preps, my heaviest deadlift, like heaviest deadlift was about we did it on average about 14, 15 days out. And then for squat, usually about 8 to 9 days ish out, and then bench about 7 days out.
Okay.
And then the week of the meet would be more like pretty drastically like an exponential taper is the term that I guess is the proper term, where we just
Mm.
like extreme reduction in intensity and
Crazy
volume.
deload.
Yeah, crazy
Yeah.
deload. Like a deload that nobody ever should really have to do. Ideally if you're training right. Um but yeah, so like that was the taper strategy that we used for prior meets, but for this meet we basically kept the intensity a lot higher. The volume was definitely reduced to basically like allow my body to like sort of recover, because by the time I was about like 7 to 8 days out from the meet is when I started like, all right, I'm kind of feeling a little bit fatigued. It's not crazy, but I can definitely feel that my body is like, hey, we need a little bit of a break here.
Yep.
Um, and then yeah, the cutoff the taper was not nearly as drastic, which I felt was a lot more beneficial for me, because prior when we used the exponential style taper, I felt detrained on meet day. I felt like I I felt like I forgot how to squat. Like I felt like
Yeah.
I forgot how to bench and I forgot how to deadlift. Like it was like it's like the weirdest feeling where it's like I do this stuff so frequently. You would think that like you know how to do it like the back of your hand, but like I forgot. Like it was the weirdest feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. I mean, I know exactly how you feel. Joey and I both play hockey. And for me, like I feel best when we're skating consistently leading up to a game. And, most people are like, okay, you want to taper off before the games,
Yeah.
ideally, rest. But I know exactly how you feel. There's times where, we have a crazy stretch of games. It's light leading up to practice. We're not on our skates as much. Then we get into the game and it's the same thing. It feels foreign.
Yeah.
Your passes aren't crisp. Your stride doesn't feel right. Where if you're consistent with it and you're kind of tapering up to the game, you feel sharp. You're like, okay, I've done this. So I know exactly what you mean, where something you do every day starts to feel foreign when you need to be at your best.
Exactly.
And now how much do you think of that is physical versus mental? Like, do you think that the mental aspect of that, in the sense that, okay, I wasn't putting out like I usually do on leading up to competition day, do you think that that kind of plays like a psychological, almost like defect on your routine and what you're so used to, and then you kind of like falter in the sense that that seems like what you're doing now, like that's the new routine, is that taper that you're talking about?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's. I would say probably it is more so mental than physical. For me
Hmm.
because, like you said, it's the routine aspect where I'm
Right.
like during certain days of the week, it's I'm doing I'm doing a squat, a bench, a deadlift, and we kept that pretty. It was a little bit modified just due to the timing of the meet and like when I normally train, but it was a lot more identical compared to prior meet preps. And that, yeah, like I said, I would say it was probably more so mental because like for me, I need to touch heavier weights just to like sort of feel
Feel
fresh,
it. Yeah.
confident, all that stuff. I need that like more frequently. But yeah, like there's definitely a physical element. Obviously, like there's it's impossible to overcome your
Yeah.
physiology in most cases. But what? Yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely mostly mental there.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I also feel like, I mean, Dylan kind of touched on it too, from the and Lane Norton, on the adrenaline aspect of things. On when you're up on the competition platform and you're about to hit your, like, say it's your, your third attempt on a squat, or like you're trying to hit a new PR or something like that. How do you prep your mind for that on a lift that you haven't, maybe like you haven't touched that weight before, you haven't done it before, like you're on the highest stage, you're at nationals or something like that. Like, how do you prepare your mind for something like that?
I guess like there's a few elements to this. So the first element would probably just be kind of embracing the concept that the weight is it the weight on the bar is inherently arbitrary. It's like just kind of viewing it as a number and not really trying to get attached to. Don't get me wrong, like it's awesome to go and smoke a landmark number, say like a
Right.
500, 600, 700 pound squat. Like it's like that's awesome. Like and who doesn't enjoy doing that? But what I guess like just keeping it arbitrary is number one, and then kind of just tip number two that I personally like to use is so the concept of like an alter ego. So it's like if you look at like any like high level professional athlete. So my favorite pro athlete of all time is Brian Dawkins. So like I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. Like he was the guy that I grew up watching, and he's the man. But he's like on the field, he kind of like morphs into this
Hmm.
absolute freak of nature that if you got hit, well, if he not to go on a tangent, but like most of his hits nowadays you'd probably get fined for. But that's that's a different like conversation. But like when he went on the field, he would like talk to the ball like a madman. Like, but that's like not who he is. Like day to day,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
day to day, like he's a very gentle, loving man. But um, he like kind of just using the concept of an alter ego, so identifying something that you view as like a powerful force, being, whatever, and like it could be an animal, it could be I don't know, it could be like your favorite video game character, it could be something like your favorite movie character, whatever it is, like just kind of like envisioning that and just kind of it sounds silly and it sounds borderline dumb, but it is like an extremely like powerful thing where if you view yourself as that whatever it is that you relate to for just about like 15-30 seconds, however long it takes, then using that like that's like an extremely powerful force. But the kind of side of that is it's draining, like you said, because there's like
Hmm.
it's like the adrenaline aspect of it, and then it's like all right, then we got to come back down, come back down, come back down. It's like like it's learning how to control that throughout a meet is something that's really really skillful and incredibly powerful at times.
Right. And that's almost like essentially what you just described is like blocking out the doubts. and the negativity that you might have when you're going up to attempt that you've never hit before. You don't know if you can do it. Because once those thoughts come in, forget about it. I think everybody knows that as soon as you think that you can't do it, it's not going to happen. Especially when you're lifting something as heavy as you are on stage. You know what I mean? Like that's something like you said is super draining, and if you're not in the right mindset, I think that's what can really separate people in any sport though, if you really think about it. Like the thing that separates, we talk about it all the time, is the mental side of the game or the sport, whatever it might be, because it really is. I think it's a bigger portion of every sport than we actually think, right? Like I'm a goalie, I always say like it's the 90-10. Like it's 90% mental, 10% physical. I think that varies from sport to sport, but like even in powerlifting, some people might think, "Oh, you're just like, you know, you're essentially working out on stage. Like you have a squat, you have a deadlift, you have a bench. Like okay, it's routine, but no, like it's not. There are a lot of things that go into that to make the bar go up, down, down, up, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
Um, Now, do you have a different approach for all three lifts, or is it all pretty similar?
Yes, definitely have a similar approach for the squat bench deadlift. So squat, I would say is the squat. I would say is the lift where I'm the most aroused. Like I definitely get like the most
Hmm.
aggressive. The adrenaline is definitely the highest. Um, just because it's like, dude, you got this heavy ass bar on your back. Like, you gotta stand the fuck up. Like that's like like there's few things that can get the adrenaline pumping like that.
Mm.
Right.
Bench, I'm pretty passive. Like, it's dude, I'm lying down for like. I'm lying down. Like I'm already
Yeah.
like about borderline like take a nap. So and then I don't get me wrong. Like I like bench pressing. Bench pressing is fun, but like you're lying down. It's hard to get excited when you lie down. But and then for deadlift is probably like the most interesting because there's a fine line. Deadlift is a fine line, like as I'm sure like you guys are familiar with like the whole arousal curve concept where like
Yep.
if you get too hyper, then your performance just plummets. And
Right.
then
Right. Yep.
so deadlift is definitely I got to be pretty careful because you got to think like, oh, it's deadlift. It's the last event of the meet, empty the tank type deal. I try to like just like that 75% like intensity gauge is probably something that I would say that I try to go for. Like just like try to like amp it up only about like 75% of the way, just because every like deadlift is probably, well, I would say bench is the most technical, but deadlift is a close second because like you got to create a really solid setup on the way to the bar. Um, if you mess that up, well then your entire lift is screwed up to begin with. So yeah, I definitely have a different approach for all three of the lifts.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you make a good point too about the whole like the stress curve and the adrenaline curve. I wanted to just explain that a little bit for the listeners that don't really understand it. Essentially, like your physiological response to stress is a very fine line when it comes to performing. Like that, I mean, that's how you see people like, they shit the bed in a big game, or they get the yips or something like that. Like that's a stress response of like the stress gets too high where it becomes counterproductive. And then, you're going up with the stress, you're getting hyped up, and then it hits a point where then your performance starts to go down. And I think that like a thing that a lot of people can relate to is getting too hyped too soon. So like before a game, like people I'm one of the biggest um you know people who used to do that. Is that I used to get hyped up way too soon before a game, and then by the time it comes time for a game and you want to get your adrenaline going, it's like you already emptied the tank, like getting fired up for the game. You know what I mean? So, and I think that is one of the things that goes overlooked, right? Like I'm sure it's the same thing in powerlifting where guys get too fired up and then they can't lift the weight. Like they got the smelling salts and stuff. Obviously, that's more prominent in the training aspect of things, but like, I think that can absolutely have a counterproductive touch to when it's time to actually lift the weight that you want to lift.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely agree with that. So like basically like kind of what I like to do for something that definitely like I found like pretty beneficial. So at least in powerlifting, depends on where you compete, but at least in the federation that I compete in, USA Powerlifting, the weigh-in is 2 hours before the competition. So basically,
Mhm.
where and that like 2 hours is a lot of time. Like 2 hours is a lot of time to like sort
Mhm.
of think about the meat, eat some food, rehydrate if you did like a water cut and everything. But it's like, all right, you might spend after weighing in, you might spend like the next 20, 30 minutes rehydrating and eating, but then you got an hour and a half. Like what are you gonna do with that?
It's a
Aside from
long time.
like warming up for squat. Like so like what are you gonna do with that? So like literally all I do is I just go in like a dark corner. I put my headphones on, I listen to like lo-fi music or like Kid Cudi, and just lie down. And like that's all I do. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing. It's I'm gonna be as parasympathetic as possible for like that hour,
Wow.
like in between, because I'm like, there's why would I waste my energy? And
Right.
then you got like
So
guys who are like you got guy like one of the guys that like I competed against. He's got his headphones on, was like jumping around and shit. I'm like, dude, we got an hour and a half until the meet starts. Like I'm like you you need you need to chill. Like what are you doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Huh,
yeah.
so
No, seriously.
walk us through a normal competition day for you. So weigh in 2 hours before. Are you consistent with your meals? Like, what are you having prior to the weigh in, post weigh in, leading up to when you step on for squat?
Yeah. So I recently just hired a nutritionist. His name's shout out Phil Smith, Sports Plus Performance. So he recently he basically just like outlines everything for like my meals. But basically the name of the game is fast acting carbohydrates. And then usually good sources of like sodium and potassium, and a little bit of magnesium as well. It
Mhm.
depends. Like, granted, this is all context dependent. So, like, did you cut weight? If so, how much? How much? Like, do we need to like rapidly rehydrate? But for yeah, like it, and then like basically to answer your question, like what do I eat pre weigh-in? So usually
Yeah.
don't eat anything pre weigh-in because I'm usually cutting weight. This past meet was a little bit of a like an outlier, but usually not. Usually don't eat anything about like 10 to 12 hours before weigh-in. So
Okay.
it's a very like very like low grade fast. And then
Right. That's still
yeah,
tough
basically
though.
like
Like
weigh-in.
on your biggest day, like that's because everybody knows that the food's gonna fuel you, right? So like cutting for that amount of time on the day you're supposed to lift the heaviest weight, like I'm sure that kind of plays a psychological effect on you too. Like fuck, like I could be like fueling myself right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like it kind of there's also like a bunch of different factors. So it's like when is the weigh-in? So in this case, for
Right.
this past meet, the weigh-in was at 10 a.m. So I'm like, all right, this is
Oh,
fine.
okay. Yeah.
It's just a later breakfast, essentially.
Mhm.
So
Right.
but for nationals, the shitty thing about that was so I competed in the primetime session. The primetime session doesn't start until 8 p.m. So that means
Holy shit.
with a 2 hour weigh-in, it was a was it 8 p.m. I think I might be off by like 1 hour. So regardless, I'm not eating anything until the earliest at like 5 p.m. Like I'm basically doing like an entire day without eating.
Yeah.
So that's yeah
Wow.
that was a little yeah, that was a little shitty, not gonna lie. But yeah, like, but to go back to the question of what do I eat on game day? Yeah, fast acting carbohydrates. So basically, just I like rice, like fast acting carbohydrates, and also stuff that's easy on your gut. So like stuff that's not gonna like cause like an upset stomach or any of that. Otherwise, like why would you want to be shitting your brains out or whatever when
Yeah.
you
Right.
got
Yeah.
you're trying to got to squat. So yeah, not good. I've seen some pretty bad examples of that. So yeah, like dried fruits, a pretty good example. Rice, white rice specifically.
Mhm.
Um, what else? Like if you have access to dextrose powder, you can buy like
Yep.
pretty
Mhm.
cheap online. Get like a big tub of it. Uh, what else? I use they're called tri-oral packets. It's basically just like rehydrate like salt like rehydration salts. You can buy super cheap, pretty affordable.
Mhm.
Use
Gotcha.
that, yeah. But usually, like the goal is to eat a good bit right after weighing, let it settle, and then gradually
Mhm.
like just like eat small snacks. So like oh, rice cakes is another thing. Rice cakes plus honey.
Yep.
Rice cakes plus honey is a good one. Yeah, little to no fat, and then
Yeah.
moderate protein. So like I had like a small thing of like beef plus rice
Hmm.
right after weighing, just protein for more or less like satiety purposes, but
Yeah.
that's about it.
And then are you snacking, like you say, rice cakes, honey? That's a great one that I'll use in between periods too. Snacking in between lifts, or what do you do?
So usually after squat is when there's with like once the meet has actually started, there's about like for me there's two main eating periods. So it's after squat and after bench. So after squat is
Mm.
definitely going to be the bigger meal, the meal. It's just a large snack really at the end of the day.
Mm.
Usually like a small what else did I use? I used bagel. Like bagel plus jelly. Bagel and jelly was the one that I used for after squat, and then after bench, I think I ate rice cakes for this one. Yeah, rice cakes plus honey. But yeah, like
Gotcha.
lighter the once you're like actually in the meat, like once that's just very light stuff that's like I said, not gonna upset the stomach. You really just like hopefully you're rehydrated by then,
Yeah.
and then you're kind of just like sipping water. Sipping water. I use you guys know Gatorade?
Yep.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Use Gatorlight mixed with dextrose powder for like a little bit extra carbohydrates.
Mm.
Um, that's pretty clutch. And then yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hmm. Interesting. So, on the topic of being easy on the stomach, are you a fan of the vertical diet? I'm sure you're familiar with it with Stan
Yeah,
Efferding.
yeah. I love Stan. I love the stuff.
Do you use it by chance? Like, is that kind of what you follow? What does your meal plan look like?
I would say like vertical esque. Vertical esque is like kind of like my yeah, because you gotta think like all right, vertical diet. What is it really? It's micronutrients.
Mm.
Micronutrients like is the foundation, which is what like spinach, oranges, cranberry juice, carrots, sweet potatoes, bell peppers, like all these things. Yeah, like
Yeah.
all those foods are pretty. You'll find those in my diet damn near every day. And
Yeah.
then yeah,
Beef and
I
rice, red meat and rice.
red meat and rice plus or potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like I don't follow it to a T because I don't eat
Mm.
only red meat. Red meat for me like that's a little bit too extreme. Because like I do it. Yeah, even though I would say I prefer red meat, I don't only eat red meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I came across Stan and more specifically the vertical diet probably shoot when was that? I want to say like 4 years ago.
Yeah. It's
Let's
about the same time for me. I want to say
say
it was
like
about
about like 4 years ago.
2018.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
like I think makes sense, and I think that the it's like you said, it's kind of built on the principles of well, you only like if you can't absorb it, what's the point?
Yeah.
If you can't absorb it, what's the point? And then just like kind of building on that from there. So I
Mm.
I I yeah, I'm not a nutritionist. Nutrition is not like my field of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. But I think Stan is definitely Stan is one of the few sources that I trust on a daily basis
Mm.
in like the fitness industry.
For sure. And well spoken too. I love
Oh
listening to
yeah, yeah,
his videos and what he has to say for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. And on the topic of nutrition and like fueling your body and whatnot, I'm curious to know what you're thinking because we always talk about, I mean, like I said, we've had a lot of bodybuilders on, not many powerlifters. If actually only you might be the only powerlifter we've had on. Granted, we do have some bodybuilders that we have on that enjoy the almost like power building essentially, like they lift heavy and all that kind of stuff. But we always talk about how bodybuilding and powerlifting is like the 24-hour athlete, like 24/7.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to be on your game from a sleep, recovery, nutrition, and training standpoint. So, like, is there one aspect of that that you lack in or that you don't enjoy? Like from a sleep side of things, like how much sleep do you get?
Yeah, I would say like I I would say like out of all like you said 24-hour athlete, it's the thing the hardest thing about especially like once you get towards like the more elite level, it's more or less in my opinion, it's not what you do inside the gym, it's more or less like what you do outside the gym that's going to
Mm,
make more of a it's going to make more of an impact. Because think about it, you might be in the gym 2 hours a day
Yeah, yeah.
or like say like in my case, I'm probably in the gym over the course of a week. I'm probably in the gym what like 12, 14 hours. And all right, well that's I got so much more time outside of that. Like that's only like a
Yeah,
fraction
yeah.
of the week. So
Mhm.
I would say I guess like my biggest area that I lack is I could probably improve upon the most is probably sleep. Um, Probably recently been averaging like 7 hours, 7 hours of sleep, which for me is it's not. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not enough. It's not like I know personally it's not enough.
Right,
Probably like in
right.
my personal experience, if I can get like 8.5 to 9, that's like the sweet spot.
Mhm. And even 7, like for a busy person, like that's a good night's sleep. I mean, obviously it's ideal, and that's what, your job consists around is being able to perform like that. So you need more, but even 7, that's not bad. I mean, we've heard worse, eh, Joey?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
There's been way
yeah.
worse.
Yeah, that's one thing we always ask because like it's one of those things that I mean there are so many things, ideas, topics, concepts, whatever you want to call them, that are completely divided between two different opinions, or even it can be many more than that. And I think sleep's one of them, right? Like some people they say like even I mean there are plenty of successful athletes and successful bodybuilders, powerlifters, freaking hockey players, basketball players, whatever it might be, that don't get much sleep. They don't sleep much at all. And somehow they still perform at high levels. Yet there are people who study sleep that say you need at least 8 to 9 hours of sleep or something like that, especially for athletes, they need more. I think it all comes down to like the personal level of the individual themselves, right? Like there are
Oh yeah.
plenty of days
Oh yeah.
where I'll get like 5 6 hours of sleep and I'll have one of my best lifts and I'm just like, how does this make any logical sense? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it doesn't add
Yeah.
up, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why we always ask, and like that's why I'm curious too about like what you think about it, and because it's one of those topics that's completely torn down the middle. And I mean just like plenty of foods, I'm sure you've seen in your research of different types of foods that some people say it's like the ultimate food for this or the ultimate food for that, and then there are other people that say stay away from it, like don't, you know what I mean? It's just so hard nowadays with the media. We have so much access to it, and there's so many opinions that are out there that are just they're not all on the same page, so it's kind of tough to follow along and all that.
Yeah. No, 100%. Like I think like sleep is one of those things where it at least in my opinion, if it's lacking, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have the world's greatest diet, or if you have the world's greatest training program. Like it is one of those things where it is probably more important than both of those. Just
Hmm.
not even like from like a performance standpoint. It is probably the single most important activity, and I feel like this is like researchers only now starting to understand it, and just how like important it is to every single thing that we do in life. I don't I have a full time job outside of powerlifting. Like I'm a
Hmm.
I'm an auditor. Like that's my full time job. But like if I have like a crappy night of sleep, like you said, for me, crappy night of sleep would probably be like 5 6 hours. When I'm if I'm in a meeting the next day, like I'm struggling. I'm struggling hard. Like it is I'm it's not I'm not nearly as focused. My attention is waning. I'm like checking Instagram constantly, all this bullshit. Like just after one night, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I really do think that the mental side of things goes before the physical. Like I mean, you kind of explained it to a T. Like you could be in a meeting the next day after a night like not a very good sleep, and you're just out of it. Your concentration isn't there, but you can go to the gym right after that and have a great lift. I
Yeah.
think it's just like it's more of like it's almost like you trick your mind into thinking that you can't perform on the 5 to 6 hours because you know you had a bad night's sleep, even though like it might not be that bad. Like that's why I think Dylan. I mean, I don't actually, Connor. I don't know if you've heard of it. The Whoop. Have you heard of the Whoop band before? It's like
Yeah.
the fitness tracker.
I used to wear one. Now I use so I use my Apple Watch to
Okay.
track everything.
All right.
There's another app. It's called Athletic that basically does like all like the features of a Whoop. But I have it because
Hmm.
I have a Apple Watch already.
Interesting. I'll have to check those out. Now that you mentioned them, I'm gonna have to ask you about them after. What?
Yeah,
So I use the Whoop, and I've used it for a long time now, and there's a noticeable difference in my like demeanor when I wake up, and if I'm in the red on a recovery,
yeah,
I'm kind of like, oh fuck, like right away. But then I'm just like, oh, it's psychological, like get that out of your head, you know what I mean? And I could go on the rest of the day and have a productive day, have a great lift, great workout, great skate, whatever it might be.
yeah,
That's why like that that's why I don't like the Whoop band and things similar to it. But I also love it from the tracking the sleep standpoint. Like that's the main reason why I have it because I think I've put a bigger, much bigger emphasis on the sleep side of things because you're just functioning at a higher rate and more productive, more efficient in everything you do. Like you might stay up late to finish something or whatever it might be, but the next day, like you're just gonna be lacking the productivity that you would have. You'd be going much slower than if you actually got a full night of sleep. So like, and then
yeah.
but then back to the media side of things, you look on Instagram, you look on all these different social media platforms, and they're like, oh, if you're not going to bed at 12 and getting up at 4, then you're not working hard enough, like all this kind of
I hate
bullshit.
that
You know what
shit.
I
I
mean?
hate that
So
shit. I
yeah,
hate that shit so
yeah,
much. It's so yeah. I don't know. It's like yeah. The whole concept of like trying to cut out sleep. No, no, don't get me wrong. Like there's a time and a place where like unfortunately you might have to sacrifice sleep to
right,
get some
right,
stuff
of
done.
course.
But on average, that should just not be a mindset. It's like think about it. It is such a dumb thing to brag about not getting sleep.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
dumbest thing.
yeah,
Why would you brag
yeah,
about that? It's like you don't sound cool doing that. You sound kind of
yeah.
silly, if anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if you're sleeping like 12 hours, 13 hours. Like that's a whole
that's
different story,
different. That's
but
way different. Way
yeah,
different.
that's way
Way
very
different.
different, very
Yeah.
different.
Exactly.
Yeah. But do you guys want to touch on anything else from like the recovery side of things or the nutrition or do you guys want to move on from here?
Yeah. I guess like one quick thing on the whole
Yep.
wearables gig. So I for that reason, the reason that you just mentioned where if you wake up and say like you're with the whoop in the example, say you're in the green, like you're thinking like, oh fuck yeah, I'm gonna have a great day. But then that like it serves as like good positive reinforcement. But if you're in the red, you know you're on the other side of the coin. But I think that it's I don't like some people just get like too attached to that, and I think
Hmm.
just kind of recognizing that it's just this is just one day and not getting too attached to it and just looking at the trends. It's like, are you getting more sleep on average? Say
Hmm.
like, because obviously like the two main things that the Whoop likes to track and most trackers like the track is, all right, what's your HRV, what's your resting heart rate,
Hmm.
like, and what was your sleep quality? It's like as long as that stuff is improving, on I would say on average, like you're going to be okay. You're going to
Hmm.
be okay. And if you're using a wearable as a means of enforcing a good habit, then then that's okay. But if you're using a Whoop to or an Apple Watch or what other like another wearable in this case, just like sort of make up for your already shitty lifestyle, then it's just like come on, yeah,
No, I
it
know.
should
Yeah.
yeah it's just like any other thing is just one factor in the many factors that exist within your life. But some people think it's like
Right.
everything.
Yeah. And but I absolutely think too that like the better the rest of your day is from the standpoint of like nutrition and how you like fuel your body, how you train your body, like working out and nutrition, very important things. But like you said, I don't even think those two add up to the benefits that sleep has on recovery and your growth as like an athlete or in this case a power lifter. Um, but I do think that if you properly feed yourself the right foods and you train hard, I think you actually need less sleep because your body doesn't need to recover as much from how poorly you're treating it the rest of the day. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That's
I
just
know,
a hot take. I don't even know if that's the case, but like that's just what I'm thinking.
I guess like maybe on average that might be true, but everything is context dependent. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, are you like for me personally, like if I'm in a caloric deficit, I need more sleep. That's
Right, yeah,
that's
yeah. Yeah.
like that's just something that I feel like is almost impossible to work around. But yeah, I think like yeah, if you kind of just view it as a summation, rather than
Hmm.
just like an individual parts. Um,
Right.
I don't know, but like for like recovery for me, in my opinion, because it's like you got sleep, like just to broadly categorize, you got sleep, nutrition, and then probably just training management. I'm gonna just call it like
Mm.
just training management throughout the week.
Hmm.
So it's not like a 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's like a 1 + 1 + 1 equals like 5. It's like an exponential effect,
Right.
in my opinion. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
And one other thing I wanted to touch on too before we move on to like your future goals and kind of
yeah,
where you want to go in the near future and longer term is the um on the basis of like alcohol and stuff like that. So I've had plenty of mentors and trainers and coaches that I've talked to about this topic, and one of the things that they mentioned is that a lot of high level athletes that are constantly in the fight mode, like they constantly have to be doing something to get better, they use alcohol to alleviate the stress that they get from just even sitting there about thinking about that they're not doing anything that they need to be training. So like what's your take on things like that and from the standpoint of like recovery? Because I think it's undisputed that like alcohol is a detriment to your recovery. Like that's just a fact. Like that's the truth. But from like the psychological recovery of training constantly and constantly being on a grind, like what is your take on that? And slash, do you like or do you consume alcohol or anything like that?
yeah, yeah. No, don't get me wrong. Like I love to go out and go get a few beers with
Yeah.
some friends. Like that's something that
Hmm.
I love to do it. Obviously, once I get closer to competition, like that doesn't really happen. But
Right.
for I think it's one of those things where so the I guess this kind of bleeds into the power belief. So the power belief
Hmm.
is probably the most is one of the most like powerful forces that we have access like quote unquote access to as humans. So if you believe that, say you got a big training session, big competition, whatever the next day, if you think having a beer, having a shot of whatever you want the night before is going to help you the next day, it will probably help you. Like even
Yeah.
even like physiologically, it may not. Like you said, it's pretty much undisputed that alcohol hinders performance. But I guess it's like one of those
From a
things where
physiological standpoint.
from a physiological standpoint, which is
Yeah.
way different.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but from a mental standpoint and like a psychological standpoint, if you think like I have a friend who's a borderline alcoholic, like just like I say that satirically, but he's I guess like by definition an alcoholic. He drinks like throughout all of his meat preps, and he doesn't stop. Like he doesn't like cut out alcohol at all, and
Interesting.
he does fine. Maybe all right, maybe you can make the argument if he cut it out he would do better, but I don't really think that might be the case with this guy. So
Hmm.
like it's like one of those things where if it's part of your routine and you buy into it and you think that it's
Right.
going to help you, it's going to help you relax, like you said, it's going to help you relax, like then it's okay to do it, like in moderation, of course. And I'm not saying like
Right.
go
Right.
out and go down like a 6 pack every single night. I'm not saying that, but
Yeah.
like I think that it's it's okay. In a perfect world, alcohol consumption would be zero for like any
Hmm.
elite athlete, but there's no that's not realistic. Like we all have social lives, some more
Hmm.
than others. But we all have social lives. We all interact with different people on a day to day basis. Like I had a few beers with my dad like this past Christmas. Like we sat on the couch
Yeah.
and chatted about whatever, watched some sports and had some beers, and like it was a good time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was a long way of saying like it's really like not as big of an impact, especially if you believe that it'll help you. It might even be like beneficial.
Right. Yeah. I like that the whole power belief thing that you just mentioned. I think that's the truth too. Like if you're somebody who doesn't drink alcohol, you're an athlete. and you know in your mind that you believe that alcohol is going to be a detriment to your performance, and then you drink alcohol, you are going to perform like shit the
Yeah.
next day or that weekend, whatever it might be. But and that's what I was talking about earlier about like how I think there's the mental side of sports and competition is way higher than we think.
Oh yeah.
Like I think that's what like people like David Goggins tries to preach about, like how your mind stops you before your body is actually at the point of no return or it can't go any further. Like the mind's always going to be the first thing to go. I just wanted to get your take on that because I think that's another one of those things that's just like kind of like split down the middle, in the sense of like the psychological versus physiological. Um,
Oh
but
yeah.
I think it's always going to be tough to pair those two together. Like if you can get um, those two things, in line, in balance, the physiological and the psychological side of competition, freaking that you'd be at the top of the game, right? Like I think that's the battle that everybody fights.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that like it kind of comes down to now. This is like a very broad discussion. I feel like we could have a standalone episode like just on this, but it's
Right,
the
right.
whole concept of, I guess, balance is the term that I'm going to use. Where, like, in my opinion, like if you want to be the best at something, if you want to be the best powerlifter, you want to be the best hockey player, you want to be the best, like whatever it is, like that you do in life, like it it's. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but like the worst thing that you can have is balance. Like you basically like
Right.
will have to shift everything to like sacrifice like pretty much everything in your life if you want to be the best
Hmm.
like at everything. I mean I'm not friends with Tom Brady. I'm not friends with Tom Brady by any stretch of the imagination, but like
Really?
yeah.
No.
But I would like to speculate that I mean that man is just I'm not like a really big Tom Brady fan, but I respect him as a competitor. But he I would like to think that his obsession with being the best quarterback slash football player to ever live led to his divorce. Like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it is just that's all he knows is knows how to be the best football player to pretty much ever live. Like, and unfortunately it resulted in a pretty sad life event for him. But
I
Mhm.
know.
that was I feel like that was probably the key factor. Like that was it. It was
Mm.
I don't think it was because Tom might have disrespected Giselle or anything like that. I think it's just because
Yeah,
Tom was
yeah.
just too hyper focused on football that Giselle was like, I
He
can't do
doesn't want to
this.
retire.
Yeah, he
Mhm.
doesn't. Yeah,
As simple as that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
And I think you are right too. Like that, I think that in most cases is true. Like some people are just wired like that. Like if you're not doing everything that you possibly can when it comes time for you to perform and compete on the field, you know, on the ice, whatever it might be on the court, you have to do everything that you possibly can, or else your confidence will not be there.
Yeah,
And I think you're right in the sense that Tom Brady, like, I think his confidence would have faltered, and not that he's half of what he used to be, but in the sense of his confidence, like he's gonna have a lot less confidence if he's sacrificing football for other things. You know what I mean? Like he's picking other things over football. I think that's the case with a lot of people, right? Like that's the whole prioritize and execute. Like you got to go down your list of priorities. Whatever's up on that first list, the other things all have to be sacrificed for that thing if you truly want to be like one of the best at what you do.
yeah. And that like I'm not saying like everybody like if you want to be granted like it's not saying like say you have powerlifting as your hobby or whatever like
Hmm.
powerlifting is like your sport in this and like in my case I'm not saying like drop everything and just go powerlift. Like
Right.
there's like you got to you know weigh the cost of that, and if that's truly what you want, that
Hmm.
by all means like go do it. But I mean, probably not the most. I mean, not the best sport to do that in to drop everything and go do it. But
Yeah.
not trying to be like not trying to like deprecate myself or anything. But like it's yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of hard. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think that like there's a cap on everybody's ability to withstand the training and the mental grind of actually putting all in on one thing. Like it comes to a point, everybody hits a burnout point, right? Like if you
yeah,
put all your eggs in one basket and you're putting everything you have into something, at some point, if you're doing that on a daily basis, eventually you're going to burn out. It's just a matter of how long and when, right? Like who can essentially like last the longest on the grind. I think those are the people that really make it to the end, which ultimately is a mental side of the game of sports, right?
100%.
So but yeah, so let's talk a little bit about before we wrap this up because we're going on an hour here, but I want to talk about a little bit about your future in powerlifting. How much longer do you think that you can kind of have an output of, worthy of still competing, right? Obviously, you're probably going to be lifting the rest of your life, just like,
Yeah.
Dylan and I as well, right? Like, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question. Definitely something that I've given thought to more within the past 12 months relative to prior to that. So I guess well, if you want to look at it like objectively, people within powerlifting they tend to hit their peak around like that 28 to like 31 ish
Hmm.
mark is like kind of when that like peak strength starts to come into play. So I'm 25. All right, well that's like 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years like from now. So
Right.
can I keep that output up from now? I don't know. I mean, like that's it's kind of hard because well, it's a concept of a I have a full time job that will pretty much like it's like my career is about to like start picking up pretty soon. Um, who knows? Like I don't have plans of having any children anytime soon. But like if that comes into like the equation, it's like good luck. Like good luck trying to train on top of a full time job. And then I coach
Right.
people on the side as well. So that takes up time. Granted, like not nearly as
Hmm.
much, probably about like 10, 12 hours a week, but that's still time out of my week that I can't get back.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But I would say probably the one thing that I probably will not stop on I will not even contemplate retirement from powerlifting until I win a national title within USA powerlifting because I am
Hmm.
so close. It has been teasing me for the past like 2 years, and it
Yeah.
is like I can't. I feel like if I quit now, don't get me wrong. I've had like a pretty successful powerlifting career, but
Hmm.
if I quit before getting that title, it would eat at me for the rest of my life.
I was gonna say you'll never forgive yourself for
It
that.
would it would it would it would eat at me for the rest of my life because I'm like, yeah, I've won like a junior world title, which is cool, but it's a junior world title. It's not the real thing. It's still an impressive
Hmm.
like feat, but um, I've come top five nationals twice, but that's it's like I just yeah I don't think I would ever be able to like forgive myself for quitting when I'm like this close.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's totally different if like an injury were to like
Yeah,
step into play or something like that. Like that's a totally different story. But if you're healthy and you're feeling good, like I actually on that, like how is your body holding up? Like is it pretty solid?
yeah. I'm like fully healthy. Like knock on wood, no injuries.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
no
awesome.
no like health complications or any of that. But no, that's a good point. If for God forbid some reason that I become like seriously hurt or some major health complication is introduced, then yeah, I need to I need to think about the situation like way differently because if
Right.
if I'm trying to compromise my health for the sake of powerlifting, like dude, it is just not worth it.
Yeah. Right,
it
right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And then so you did mention that you coach too on the side. Now, is that something that I don't know. I mean, I know you said that you're an auditor, I believe. Is that what you
correct.
you said? Yeah. Okay. So now could coaching potentially be something that you want to do full time down the road when your powerlifting competing career at least is over, or what are your thoughts on that?
I guess I don't necessarily think that I would ever want to coach full time because
Hmm.
it's one of those things where I don't know like I like powerlifting, but to make it my full time job, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I would get bored of it. I feel like it would just like get a little bit. I feel like it would get like a little bit too. Yeah, I feel like it would.
Stale.
I feel like it would just get
Yeah.
like stale over time.
Yeah.
So I feel like just because I coach about like 13, 14 people, like depending on when you ask me in the year. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, that's pretty much like all I can handle at this point with full time job plus being a
Right.
high level competitor myself.
Right.
Yeah,
It's awesome. Yeah, that's good though. I mean, it's still though. It's like you're still have a piece in it, right? Like, eventually you'll probably still keep up that time of like helping people because you want to give back too. Like, I'm sure that's part of the reason why you're doing it because you're one of those people that stands for powerlifting and is one of the more successful ones. So when it comes time for you to teach the generations that are younger than you or even same age or older, right? Like people are powerlifting. Hell, I seen a guy squatting 400 pounds. He's like 72 years old. I don't know if you saw that on Barbend at all, but I
yeah,
was like, holy shit! Like if that could be me someday, I'm down for the cause, you know.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all that stuff's good. Like I'll be doing the same thing with hockey probably until the day I die. Like it might not be a main thing, but it's definitely going to be something that you want to give back to for something that you've put so much time into, right? Like that's the other thing. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we dove into a good amount of topics today, but like you said earlier when we were talking about the recovery side of things, like we could each one of these topics could be an episode in itself. But we'll definitely have to have you on again to do so. But do you have any closing thoughts or anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Um, Nothing particular, but no, pretty excited for 2023. I feel like powerlifting is definitely in it is just like exploding in terms of I
Hmm.
would say like popularity. People are just like getting into
Mhm.
it.
Right.
The skill, like the talent pool, is just getting bigger and bigger. Like the records are just getting broken constantly now, and it's going to be a really interesting year. I feel like, and like the competitive powerlifting landscape, and pretty excited for it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Isn't it crazy that just one more thought. Isn't it crazy that if you look back like even a couple decades, right? Like nobody's touching the weight that people are putting up nowadays. Do you think those numbers are going to keep increasing? And at like what point do you think we're going to like are we going to see a time where people are squatting 2,000 pounds or like what's the deal here?
I mean, like I guess with powerlifting, the limit does not exist, but so
Yeah.
but yeah, no, that's an interesting
Yeah.
like thought experiment because I guess it, I mean it's going to taper off at some point. It's going to taper off
Yeah,
at
yeah.
some point, but like the numbers that I'm doing, if I had done so, I think if I had done my current numbers at like 2018 or like 2017 nationals, I would have. I think I would have to go back and look at it. I might be misspeaking here, but I think I might have won by like 30 kilos, which is a
Holy.
runaway.
And that's 5 years. That's like
It's
that's
not.
insane.
It's like in the grand and like in like the timeline. It's like there,
Yeah.
not even. It's like
Mhm.
there. Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah.
That's
Crazy.
It's
nuts.
pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, they just keep finding new ways to improve your physical capabilities. So it's like I don't see an end in sight, at least anytime soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But Dylan, you got anything else for him?
No, it's a great conversation again. Jump into some of the specifics of, what your competition day looks like and your training. So it's great to listen to your knowledge and just take that all in and share with our listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on this.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. We'll talk soon. All right, and that is another interview in the books. Connor Borkert. Um, all of his social links will be in the description and more info about him as well. Um, but man, I was just kind of like conceptualizing like how much weight he actually lifts for his body weight. Like we're essentially like right around the same weight as him,
Mm.
and
When he competes, yeah.
he's putting up 666 on squat, 700 dead, and a 468 bench.
It's
Are you
crazy.
kidding me?
Crazy weight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's absolutely
It's this damn
insane.
hockey thing, kind of just in the way of us lifting big weights, eh?
I know, seriously. Like you try so hard too, like especially after, I mean, you guys lift after you skate, but which I've done before too, but that just
Brutal.
takes it away. Like your
You got
strength is just
nothing
not there.
left in the
Yeah.
tank. Yeah.
There's nothing left in the
It's
tank. Yeah.
it's funny you say that. Gorms and I were talking on the way home the other day. Gorms has a little brother, 2 or 3 years younger than him. Doesn't play hockey. And he's like, man, like it drives me crazy. My brother just gets to get huge every day. He's getting stronger. He's slowly gaining on me. Like, he just hit 225 this summer. Now he's benching 280. And it's like, my bench hasn't moved all year, like
Yeah.
he's just like this damn hockey
Yeah.
thing is just getting in the way.
Yeah. I know, right? I know. And dude, in the sense of like the whole pool of hockey players, like we're in the high percentage
Hmm.
for like being able to lift the weight that we do. Like not many people can do
Yeah.
that. I think for that exact reason though. But like that's like one of the things we put emphasis on, so we're like able to kind of push those boundaries a little bit. But I think in the grand scheme of things, like not many hockey players can lift very much. I mean, we even saw that. We've seen it in recent past with some combines. Like some guys can't even do a single pull up.
Yeah.
That's a joke. That's a joke. Um, but yeah, no, real quick though, like wow, we ended up with at the end of the interview was talking about like the cap on like the human body, physiological, like what, and there has been some research on this, but I think it's going to be proven wrong again and again and again. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you think the cap is? Like, just on a whim, like, what do you think the human body can actually push to for weight? Like,
I don't know. I mean, in our lifetime, if you're to take a step back and look from like an evolutionary standpoint, or like, okay, the last however many thousand years, like, yeah, it's probably exponential. It's probably crazy. But like, if we even you look what Connor said in 5 years, his totals would have won, and now he's just in the mix. So if it continues on that trend, like it can only continue like that for so long. I think I agree with him. It's eventually going to taper off, and then you know continue to take off again and taper off. But like I don't know. I mean, if it continues at that pace, people will be benching 4,000 pounds at some point. Like that's nuts. So I think eventually, like there will be a limit. But yeah, like you said, there's like look at the health things. Like back, you know, 50 years ago, people were smoking cigarettes in between
yeah,
periods. Like there wasn't awareness around that this was bad for your
yeah,
health and affects performance. And same thing with alcohol. And now we're at a stage in I don't know if you want to call it a stage in evolution or a stage in our lives where you know that research and that data is available to us, and we can make informed decisions, educated decisions about it for our betterment. But I don't know. I don't know how far it can go. I think we're definitely going to continue to find better ways to train, which will ultimately increase performance.
hmm
But I think there eventually will be a limit.
yeah. And you know, this correlates to a lot of different things like life expectancy too. Like that is one thing
Hmm.
that has increased every year, year over year. Except I think this past year it actually dropped a year. Uh, in the
Because of
U.S.,
COVID.
I believe, because of COVID. Yeah. Which who knows if that's even true. But regardless, I think that like you're right, there will be a cap, but I also think that the information that's out there right now will be contested in the future that the things that are good now actually has adverse effects. Like I bet you anything there will be something that we are doing, you and I, that Connor's doing right now, that 20, 30 years down the line, maybe even less than that, they'll be like, hey, like actually this is a detriment to your performance. You know what I mean? I think that's
Oh
just the
yeah,
facts. Like that's gonna
and it
happen.
could be something with our food. Like look how the food's changed. Way back when it was, oh, don't eat eggs, they're bad for you. Oh, well, only eat the whites, they're good,
Yeah.
they're bad for you. Well, now
Yeah.
it's like, no, eat the yolk, that's where all the vitamins are. And oh
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
cholesterol, blah, blah, blah. It's gone back and forth, and I'm sure there'll be something like that with another food that we consume. Oh,
I
we were
know.
told that eating whatever was good for us. Now it's like it's going to change. Research is going to change. I think that's inevitable. But
Yeah.
look at just. I think that's an interesting topic too. Not to really stray off the beaten path here, but about our food quality, how it's changed over the
Mm.
last number of years. I think that's something that it'll have to change in the future. Like you look at what the average American eats, however, whatever percentage it is of the population is obese, and like you look what the average American diet consists of. It's like processed food and just fillers. It's
Yeah.
nothing, no real food anymore. Um, and I forget where I was listening to this. They had the cafeteria manager on. He was talking about that we feed our children glorified dog food. And it's like, how are we supposed to fuel a generation and build a generation when that's how they fuel themselves, you know, like, and I think that'll be something that has to change. There'll be some sort of, not a revolt or a revolution, so to speak, but some sort of major change where it has to be done. Like, we can't continue to live like this and eat like that,
No, I
fuel
know.
ourselves like that.
Well, the fact of the matter is like, okay, we're kind of living in the central of that for now. Like the U.S. is one of the most evolved countries and furthest along countries in the world, and we're at the point where like the food that we're making, like you know, Burger King, fucking McDonald's, whatever it might be, like there are a lot of places in the world that don't have those kinds of things, and they only have
Mm-hmm.
food from the earth. You know what I mean? Like the legit, like primal things
Mm-hmm.
that you would eat. You know what I mean? And ultimately, like they're probably eating healthier than a good amount of people in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
where we are furthest along in the process, which makes you wonder, like, this is, you know, this is where we're headed over time. And now there's this whole like cultivation of meat. Like that could be a whole other thing where they're literally making meat in a
Mm-hmm.
freaking factory somewhere. Like that's coming. It's coming. Whether we like it or not, it's coming. And I'm sure there will be a day where we see like bans on meat and stuff like that because of like the limited resources. Or like
Mm-hmm.
some endangered species or something like that. Um, and then that's going to be a learning curve too, like the cultivated meat. Like, okay, it might start off in like 20 years down the line, they'll be like, yeah, that killed like 30% of the population or something like that. Like that shit's going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's that we could go into a whole nother episode with that. But
Yeah.
regardless, that was a good interview. And honestly, I'm excited to, I think he'll even be on again in the future. And hopefully
Yeah.
it's with a national title under his
Yeah.
belt,
And we didn't
you
get to
know?
say it to him, but like, best of luck to Connor. Obviously, we'll be following along and hoping for nothing but the best, and you know, wishing him the best in his journey and his chase for a national title.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And he's still so young, dude. Like 25. I thought he was older
25.
than that, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. Um, but yeah, that's awesome. He's still got years ahead in his prime, so I think he'll definitely where he's at now, just finishing in like the top five consistently. I
Mm,
think he'll definitely grab one of these
for
years.
sure.
Um, but yeah, so we thank Connor for coming on. Um, we'll have more of his story in a future episode, or even some more topics that I thought we got into pretty deep there that were very value based. Um, but you guys can follow us on Instagram at underdog_brand. You can watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube, and then you can listen to it on all main podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the list goes on there. But thank you guys for listening. Stay tuned for more info. We'll see you on the next episode.